There we go. I see the message. Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm calling this meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force to order. It is 11:15 on February 11th, 2026. I'm Barbara Neal. As a reminder, the meeting's being recorded and the recording will be posted to the task force webpage, excuse me, following the meeting. So let's start with our usual roll call of task force members. If you could verbally acknowledge your presence when I call your name. Now, Jen, I'm going to pause here and ask, are you here as a co-chair or what? What's the role today?
If you have a quorum without me, let's make me just a visitor.
Okay, we do have a quorum. We do have a quorum without you. Okay.
Perfect.
So then let's go to the task force roll call. So Paul White.
I'm here.
Okay. Ron Kumitz.
Here.
Jim Mack.
Here.
Mike Dungis.
Here.
Okay, and I don't see Michael Wright yet, though he did say he would be here, so we'll watch for him to join. Also joining us today is Commissioner Morrison and Emily Mullaney from Department of Public Safety as our administrative support. And of course, our project management team, Rick, Dom, and Elizabeth from Televate. Looks like we have Phil and Jason from Mission Critical. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
And I'm scanning around to see if we have any members of the public. I don't see anyone.
Dean.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
Dean Gilmore.
There he is, Dean Gilmore. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Dean Gilmore. I represent Vermont State Firefighters Association and Addison County Firefighters Association.
Great. Welcome. Thanks for joining. And just joining us, I see is Senator Renner. We're just doing public introductions. If you would care to introduce yourself. Maybe she's not quite all the way in. So Senator Renner, can you hear us? Okay, I'm going to move on to approval of the agenda. Now, the agenda was distributed to task force members by email. It's also available on the web page. I do have a change I'd like to suggest for today's agenda, and that would be to move new business to the top or just after approval of the minutes in order to introduce the information that Emily distributed by email this morning. That would be the commissioner's email to members of House GovOps and Military Affairs. So that's one change. Does anyone have any other changes they'd like to see to the agenda?
Barb, that's not anything critical, but I would suggest, since this is a special meeting that was called for the purpose of reviewing draft legislation, that we hold off on approving the minutes of the last regular meeting until the next regular meeting.
Okay. Just making a note. So far we have move new business and remove approval of the minutes and postpone that till next week. Anything else? Okay, so is there a motion to approve the agenda with the changes we just discussed?
So moved.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jim. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda as discussed, raise your hand or signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hands are up. Agenda's approved with those changes. So with that said, that means we skip the next agenda item, the approval of minutes, and we move on to new business. So I'm not sure if everyone has even had a chance to see the email that was distributed to you by Emily this morning. It had an attachment, which is the email from Commissioner Morrison to Representative Hango and Chair Matt Byrong of House Government Operations and Military Affairs. outlining the position of the Department of Public Safety on the task force recommendations. The representative that we're working with on that committee, Representative Hango, has asked for us, the task force, to consider the commissioner's comments as we develop our response to the draft legislation, which was our original sole purpose for today. I would like to acknowledge the late distribution of that email, and it's my belief that task force members need to be given some time to digest the information to see if it will in fact impact our response to the legislature. But I think maybe now I could open it up for initial thoughts from the task force if people care to share. Nothing? Okay.
Barb, I'll just say that, you know, contrary to the commissioner's comments that it should not come as a surprise, some of the comments did come as a surprise to me, so I need a couple of days to reread through it and come up with where I agree, where I disagree, and what I might have for a response.
Okay. Fair enough. That makes sense to me too. I know I've obviously read it. I will need to confer with the 911 board chair and possibly the full board before I can speak to their position on this input. Anything else for initial thoughts? So here's what I'm going to propose we do. I'm going to recommend for today that we proceed to developing a response to the legislature based on the current task force recommendations, including for governance, but then hold off on finalizing those recommendations until next week, after we have all had a chance to really review the commissioner's input and have had an opportunity to fully consider it, and then make a decision about whether or not it will change our recommendations to that draft language. What do task force members think about that approach?
I like that.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
So I actually had some comments about the edits to the document that came out, I don't know, a few days ago, which was, trying to remember what it was titled DR Rec 26 Chairs Notes DocX.
Yes.
And the observation that I had is that the recommendation was that there be representation from a pile of first responder organizations and from the Department of Health's EMS Advisory Committee. And then another note was added further down that there be a representative from the Department of Health. And my observation is that that whole thing is going in the direction of stacking way too many state employees on top of the first responders and other actual stakeholders. The Department of Health is so interested in communications that they collect information on ambulance frequencies and all sorts of other things, and then they proceed to throw them in a copy paper box and not even bother to put them in a spreadsheet. So I think that we risk forming yet another body that gets bogged down in bureaucracies rather than reflecting the interests of the people on the street, so to speak.
Okay, Ron, can I ask you to just pause for a minute there? I didn't want to interrupt you. You kind of jumped ahead to the next item on the agenda. I want to make sure people are good with this. Jim had said he's good with continuing to consider the commissioner's input and then make any necessary changes next week. Anybody else, any objections to that? Okay. So having said that, we will officially move on to the next item. And Ron, I can share a copy of that document that you are referencing, so we can all be looking at it. Let me see here. Okay. So this is the draft legislation that came over to us from House Gov Ops. And Paul, Dan, and I met on Monday to go over it and include our initial feedback, right, for discussion here today. The part you're referencing, Ron?
The part that I'm referencing is one of the comments toward the bottom on the right side. Hold on, let me pull up my real version. So there's a large box. It's it's the third box down, said has a whole list of representatives. And then after that, there's a separate one that says add the commissioner of the Department of Health or designee.
Right. Let me tell you where that originated from. The list that you see there was what was developed within the working group, the governance working group. We had identified all of those various people to be on this proposed governance board, and then had also I had a conversation with Will Moran after the fact. The Department of Health originally said they didn't want to be considered as part of this proposed board. Then they came back and said that they would like to be part of it. As I recall, we discussed that in an earlier task force meeting and said we would defer. Well, I did not have an objection to that. Now I'm hearing that there may be an objection to that. So I think we can definitely talk through whether that's an appropriate addition to this list or not. But that's the history of why that comment's there. Did you have more to add on that, Ron?
No, I mean, my general feeling about this is that the representation, I mean, I see the police chiefs in there, I see the VSFA in there. I notice it mentions the Vermont fire chiefs, which is not, as far as I can tell, even really an organization anymore. The career chiefs is. I mean, there was a fairly wide representation, including the dispatchers. But my feeling is that if we want this to be effective, we need to minimize the representation of those who are not directly involved in what we're doing here. I see ADS in there. Everybody knows my feelings about ADS. I'm seeing what other. Got to call out my other document here. So yeah, I mean, I guess where I'm going at this is that I'm good with the EMS advisory people, but it's kind of like one per customer here. If they're going to represent the Department of Health, then then in my humble opinion, that is the Department of Health's representation. And while I do have a great deal of respect for Will Moran, who knows who could show up after Will Moran? So there's always that kind of thing. And now I will step off my box to hear from others.
Yes. Dom, I see your hands up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I do want to point out that I recall during the governance working group discussion, I think they were striving to have equal representation from the public safety discipline. So I believe there are 2 recommended representatives from law enforcement, 2 from fire, and there were recommended 2 from the EMS community. So I believe with the addition of Department of Health, that would make three from the EMS community. So that would not have things entirely equal with
Yeah.
that addition.
Okay,
Barb, this is Paul. Dom is correct from the governance working group standpoint, but I don't remember, my understanding was that the Department of Health would have one representative, whether it be from the EMS advisory group or whether it be from, you know, Health Department Central Office. We really didn't care, but the intent was for the Department of Health to have one representative, is my recollection.
and I thought we had determined that the advisory committee was separate from the Department of Health. That's my recollection from my conversation with Drew Hazelton.
It's made up of stakeholders who are not Department of Health employees, but they sort of report to, I don't know if they report to is the right way to put it, but they are an entity of, or a committee of the Department of Health, is my understanding. The division of the health department that oversees EMS.
Okay. Let me just make a note here.
So I want to backtrack in saying, you know, I'm not like sitting here going, oh, there's three people from EMS. We don't need any more of those ambulance people. That was not my intention. I think if we want to keep the group, you know, this entity effectual and not get bogged down. I mean, one of the example that I have is the Fire Service Training Council, which has all sorts of people on it who are not in any way related to the fire service. And that body does all sorts of stuff that are never in the best interest of particularly the volunteer fire service in the state of Vermont. So I think by keeping the whole thing a little bit lean and the representation as directly related to what, you know, the concepts that are being dealt with, then we stand the best chance to succeed, not to mention the best, you know, keeping the credibility of the whole thing from falling apart.
Ron, you're not wrong. The working group, when we came up with this list, we wanted to make sure that, you know, in order to have stakeholder buy-in, that the stakeholder members of the board needed to have equal say along with the state employees. So we tried hard not to, although there were a variety of state agencies that should be involved, we didn't want state employees to outnumber the stakeholder representatives.
Right, definitely not. I remember that discussion clearly. And would they is a question if we left Department of Health in there and the rest of the list the same. So we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 state, and I'm including the 911 board and the broadband commission on that. So then we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if you include the EMS advisory committee. Should we add a placeholder to make this decision when we finalize next week, or we can continue to hash it out? What do we think?
My gut feeling is that this list is going to change several times before it ever sees the light of day. So we shouldn't get bogged down too much over one position right now.
Okay. And if we take the recommendations that came from the working group, those are included in this first part of the comment here. So maybe we allow the discussion to continue at the legislature, and other groups can advocate for inclusion or exclusion as they see fit. Make sense? I think I see Paul nodding.
Yes. You can
Okay,
hear my head shaking.
I can. So I'm going to make, the note I'm going to make here is to include only the working group recommendation, not Department of Health. At this point, anyway. How's that?
That makes sense.
Okay. So I want to go back to the beginning because, Paul, I have your list of comments that you sent me. I don't know if you have them in front of you too, or because you had some
I
comments.
do. I emailed them to you just in case I wasn't able to call in. But yeah, if you want me to, I do have them. If you want me to go through them.
Yeah, I kind of
So
want to
on
go in order here. So,
Okay. So on that draft bill, unnumbered bill that you're referring to, starting on page 1, line 7, I'm not sure why they labeled it an act relating to emergency management rather than an act relating to public safety communications.
so I think I know the answer to that. This language is part of a larger bill that does address emergency management and
Okay.
and other things. I don't know. I don't have it all in front of me, but it's touching on many different things.
Okay.
I think that's why.
Okay. And continuing on line 16, similar vein under membership. It says that I don't have the actual bill in front of me, but it refers to membership on the board by the director of emergency management. And I'm not sure, well, this list that they have is not even remotely similar to what the task force had recommended. I don't know why the director of EM would serve on this board, as public safety communications is not in EM's wheelhouse.
Right. Right. And I think well, my recommendation, and we'll finalize next week, is that we strike the membership that they've outlined here and replace it with the working group recommendation.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. And then jumping over to page 3 on line 10, where it talks about the board shall adopt rules governing the policies, procedures, and protocols to be followed by all dispatch centers within the state. Somewhere we need a definition section to define what is a dispatch center. And then also in the next line, we need to define what comprises dispatch services.
okay.
And then still on page 3, line 15, I'm not sure if there's a different word to put in there, but I think the word classifications is problematic. Because when you're talking about classifications, you're talking about things that are subject to collective bargaining or union contracts. I don't think we're prepared to meddle with those right now. So I think the word classifications is just problematic for me.
So maybe just strike it out.
Right. I think job descriptions or position descriptions or qualifications. But the word classifications has a specific meaning when it comes to the labor world.
Yep. All right, I made that note.
Okay. And then over on page 4, at the very top of the page, where there's a list of systems that this new CAD system would need to interface with, that needs to include systems outside of the state of Vermont, like, other states, DMV driver files and vehicle files and criminal history files, NCIC. I don't have a good replacement verbiage right at my fingertips to insert, but it needs, those external databases need to be included to interface with the new CAD.
Okay, I will
And then-
add external databases, right?
Yep.
external applications.
Applications is the better word.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then on line 5, just a repeating note, the terms dispatch center and dispatch services appear again, but haven't been defined. And then again on line 10 is the word classification. And then the last comment is just sort of general. This bill talks a lot about the governance board and it addresses financing a little bit, but it doesn't say anything about LMR pilot project. So Rick had sent us an email late yesterday or early today, I forget which, with some suggested language that could be inserted to address the LMR piece. And I think he's right on. We need to at least get something in there to make reference to LMR projects.
Yes. And where was that? It was, Rick recommended it go to under 4702 line 18. So I'm not sure where that is.
It's within that
Down the bottom.
list of responsibilities there.
Board authority and duties rulemaking.
Jim's correct.
No,
It's
I'm still not
above.
finding it.
It's above that.
Above this?
Yes,
Oh, right here. Okay.
yes, it is. Within that list of the board shall, I thought, my suggestion was to add another line item in regarding LMR.
Okay. So what I'm thinking I'm doing, I'm taking a bunch of notes here. And what I think I'm going to do when we're all done discussing this is neaten them up, redistribute this back out to everyone so that we can finalize next week. So hopefully that works for everybody. Okay. All right, Paul, did we get all of your, looks like we got all of your
Yes.
comments accounted for here. Okay.
Yeah,
right, so-
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to scroll. Hold on. Let's go back to the beginning. And I just want to check with all task force members. Are there any additional comments on this page 1? You can see I have one we haven't talked about yet, but why don't I jump right into that? Because I think it's pretty significant. At line 13, the original draft language says there is created within the Department of Public Safety, a Public Safety Communications Board. And my understanding from all of the task force discussions is that our recommendation is that it be an independent state board, not attached to any other agency or department, similar to the Enhanced 911 Board, or even the Broadband Board. I included 2 references to boards that are independent or quasi-independent, whatever you want to call it, as a reference for whoever writes this language. So now I also want to recognize that the commissioner's email to House GovOps might play into this discussion. So where do we want to, well, we're gonna finalize this next week. And we decided we were going to use the task force current recommendations to edit this language. So any concerns about having this stricken within the Department of Public Safety?
I think that needs to go away.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't include that in my comments because I figured we would get to that when we go through the commissioner's email a little closer. But you're right. It was absolutely was the intent of the task force that this be an independent body, not part of some other state agency.
Right.
Is the concern, do you think it's written that way because the concern is how they're going to manage the funding mechanism and who's going to be in charge of the financing? Why would to include it that way? Or do you feel like that was just a default when they wrote it up?
I'm not really sure. I had listened to some testimony where the Ledge Council that drafted this was kind of speculating on where this might live. So I don't think it was intended, you know, as a requirement. I think it was just putting language together,
Okay.
with,
Yeah.
with only, you know, they were looking at our preview of recommendations too, so they might not have had, they didn't have the whole picture in front of them. So, and that's
Got
why
it.
they came back to us, so.
Got it. I do think then striking it, as long as there's not like a financial component concern or you know, a you know, the ability to manage those funds, then I think that taking that out makes sense.
Okay. Now, we've already discussed what we're going to do with the membership. So at the bottom of this page, I've crossed out a bunch of things, their proposed membership. And we're going to replace with the working group recommendation. On page 2, any concerns with the terms section at line 9 or the compensation section starting at line 13? Okay, hearing nothing, we'll move on. When I clean this draft up, I will add a more robust comment here about Rick's language for the LMR. I'll just insert what he had proposed. And we can take a look at it again next week. Any other, let's see, I had one other comment under board authority. And again, this is assuming a separate independent board, right? They will need to have the authority to hire an executive director and additional staff. There's language to that effect in the 911 enabling legislation that could be essentially copied and pasted if need be. And I added this second comment about, in the case of the 911 board, the executive director is the appointing authority. Because when I listened to the testimony of House GovOps, there was discussion briefly about how do you determine who the appointing authority is if you have an independent board, or who do you name as the appointing authority? So I just added that in to kind of answer that question that the committee had, at least briefly. Okay, so when we add in the LMR information, is there anything else that we need to be thinking about in the board authority and duties section? I think they all come pretty directly from the recommendations we sent over. I've got Paul's comments here about needing definitions for dispatch center and dispatch services. Rick or Dom, do you remember if dispatch center was defined in like the mission critical work? Or do we have a definition that the task force has been using, or do we need to come up with one?
I believe we did have one that we discussed at the working group level previously.
Okay.
I can
Maybe
go back and look for that.
Okay. I think that'd be good. If we already have a definition, then why reinvent the wheel? Okay. Okay. Same for dispatch services, or maybe we can build a definition from there.
I think you could probably derive it from the definition of a dispatch center.
Okay. Anything else on this page? Page 3. All right. I made a note about adding integration with, or capability of interfacing with external applications. Highlighted. Yep.
I'm sorry. My only comment there about CAD is it was very specific in a lot of the working group discussion about a multidisciplinary CAD. I don't know if we want to add that in.
Okay.
That would be good.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, don't look at my spelling. Okay. I've highlighted the definitions we need here. And then under the authorization for ongoing expenditure of funds, there's actually two questions here. One is, would a separate fund need to be created to which these funds are moved? And I think that's really a question for the legislature, right? I don't know how that works. And then the other question here actually goes to the final section too. The effective date is, can we get task force authority to spend some of the funds in support of the proposed projects sooner than July 1st? And again, that'd be a question for the legislature. Let's see, Ron, go ahead.
So, I have a comment. Well, I'm not sure if I'm out of order here because I've been reading an offline copy. Where am I? I am on. I'm back on board authority and duties rulemaking. Item A.
Item A4.
A4. Which is the work with community broadband and public service to address issues regarding coverage gap to cellular providers. My gut feeling is that the wording potentially needs to be changed, lest this board become another place for people who don't have cellular coverage in their living room to voice their gripes. Can that be modified to somehow address those coverage issues as they directly pertain to public safety communications or something like that? I mean, does anybody see what I'm getting at here?
Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, I picked up on that too, but I didn't have better words pop into my head at the moment, so I didn't include it in my comments. But yeah, it just, the whole thing was worded kind of funky.
So if we
I don't
were,
think we want to be involved in cell tower siting and all of that. But
no. So to address issues regarding any coverage gap data to cellular providers as they direct, well, I guess we'd have to structure the sentence correctly. I'll work on that and try to get something in there that looks what we're trying to say here. Address issues that directly pertain to public safety communications and any coverage. Okay. I made a note, Ron. We'll get it worded in there properly.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, if you can, I'm sorry, if you can go back to the governing board again, just remembering a couple of the questions that came out initially. I think you addressed the appointing authority. Do we also need to address how the chair is established? We want to make a
yes.
recommendation.
Right. I did skip over that, didn't I? So the original draft that came over to us appointed the executive director of the 911 board as the chair. Do we want to, what's the question, Dom? Do we want to ask the legislature to define the chair, or do we want to approach this some other way? Maybe the governor appoints the chair.
Yeah, I just thought the task force may want to make a recommendation as to how the chair is established.
Yeah, what do we think on that?
I would think that in order for this to be, a recognized executive branch entity, if we want the executive director to be the appointing authority, the governor would have to be involved in naming the chair. Or I'm sorry, naming that person. I mean, I don't think the board can elect their own chair. I guess I'm mixing up chair with executive director.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be addressed how the chair is selected regardless, whether the board chooses their own, whether the governor does it, or whether it's spelled out in statute who serves in that role.
Do we have an opinion on how that should be? All right. Why don't we come back to this again next week and see if people have any firmer thoughts on that? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That would be next week. Okay, anything else on the draft language? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Actually, I'm going to save this and then stop sharing. Maybe I'm not. Okay. All right, now, so like I said, I will clean up and redistribute what we discussed today. And now I'm struggling to get back to my agenda. Hang on. And we will revisit this next week at the regular meeting and finalize our recommendations that are going to go back to the legislature while also considering the comments of the commissioner. Right? That's where we are. Okay. All right. Anything else here before we move on to public comment? All right. I was looking to see if the commissioner is still with us.
No, she put a note in the chat indicating she had to move on to something else.
Okay. I will move on then to Senator Renner. Do you have any comment for us today?
Hi, everyone. No, just glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Dean Gilmore?
Yeah, I got a couple. One thing I would start with is verifying what Ron said earlier. The Vermont Fire Chiefs Association has not met in several years. They have actually even let their paperwork with the state lapse, and it's due to lack of organizational issues. But and they do have representation or spots for representation on several different boards in the state that are not being fulfilled, which is too bad because it hurts the volunteer fire side. The EMS Advisory Commission, I'm not sure if you're aware that is also made up of fire and EMS. The Vermont State Firefighters have 2 positions. The EMS has 2 positions. And I'm not sure who else the rest is. Actually, I'm pretty sure the career people might have 2 positions on there. And then I have no problem with the governor making the appointment, except that I can see where the governor would have the authority if he's making the appointment to your chair, that the governor would he could put somebody on there as your chair that has had nothing to do with this whole task force from the day one, which could really put you put a ways backwards. And so I think that if the you obviously have been working well together, and so I think if you had the option of electing your own chair, that your whole board would feel better and continue to get along better. So, and like I said, I have no problem with the governor. It's just he's not obligated to appoint somebody that has been part of your task force.
That's good feedback. Okay, I appreciate that. Do we know who are the appropriate fire associations that we need to have listed here?
So right now, the only active three is the Vermont State Firefighters Association, the Vermont Career Chiefs Association, and the Professional Firefighters of Vermont, which is the career people.
So we would want to, okay, I'll make a note of that in the membership as well, and we can finalize that next
Yeah.
week as well. Thank you, Dean.
And just for other information, your career, the PFFV, they represent about 250 firefighters. The VSFA is representation of about right now, just under 3,000. They're in the process of collecting their dues for 2026. So.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Kim Cheney, do you have comments for us today?
Well, very briefly, I think you should have an appointee on the board, one appointed by the Senate and another appointed by the House. I think the board should be broader than just a stakeholder representation. You're going to be dealing with a lot of one issue that's never even come up is are we going to raise money on the property tax? And I think we should, because that produces local interest and buy-in to a project. But I think you need a little broader representation on that board. I'm just suggesting the House and Senate get a say of who's going to be on it.
All right, thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, what I'll do then is, these were some really specific recommendations that came in public comment, so I'll put a placeholders in the draft that we're working on to note these, and we can see if we want to do anything with them next week. How's that? Okay. All right, let's see, we moved new business, although I never did ask if anyone else had any new business. Okay. Then I will confirm the next meeting date. We are on the books for next Wednesday, the 18th at 11:15. Anything else for today? Okay, I will, I have some commitments this afternoon, but I will try to get that draft, the revision out to everyone, probably via Emily, hopefully tomorrow. And we will go from there. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mike.
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of adjourning for today, raise your hand or signify by saying aye. Hands
Aye.
are up. Meeting is adjourned. I'll talk to you all soon. Thank you very much.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
day, everyone.
Bye-bye.